Right, there we go. Right, it's now recording. Okay, so welcome. Oh, I'll screen share. 1 second. Can you all see my PowerPoint? You can just nod if you can see it. Yep. Okay, terrific. Right, so I'm going to talk to you about the 15 years or 14 years that I spent at Berkeley Castle, and I'm still delivering presentations on it to this day. It was an amazing excavation, Bristol University excavation. We started in 2004. We went on a reconnaissance trip to Berkeley with Mick Aston, Mark Horton, and a few other of my colleagues, basically to scope out the site and to see whether or not it was worth. So basically, the then castle custodian asked us to go to Berkeley and undertake a project around the castle and what was reputed to be an Anglo-Saxon minster. And so basically we went to Berkeley to try to find this Anglo-Saxon minster. And also there was confusion over the origins of Berkeley. So we were trying to figure out the origins of Berkeley as well. So this is why the project started. And there were basically lots of building work going on around Berkeley. So before Berkeley got ruined in terms of development, the custodian at the castle at the time asked us to go to Berkeley and undertake this project so that they could understand a bit more about their town and the development of the town. And so we went there back in 2004, 2005 and started to undertake this project. So the project itself attempted to pinpoint and understand changes to the landscape and the settlement with its transition from what was reported to be an Anglo-Saxon minster into this Norman feudal castle-centered lordship. And we described the project as Minster, Manor and Town. Now, if you don't know what a minster is, basically, an Anglo-Saxon minster, it's the birth of Christianity in this country. So even though the Romans introduced Christianity back in the 3rd and 4th century, when the Romans left this country, they supposedly took Christianity with them. And essentially the Anglo-Saxons arrived, and the Anglo-Saxons were to start with, we've got pagan burials from that period. Okay, so we lost Christianity in this country, and so we were looking for this early minster site. We were looking for this 7th or 8th century minster site, and we were trying to figure out whether the town started its life a lot like a lot of other settlements in Gloucestershire from a Roman settlement. And what was really important about the castle is that the castle itself has got a muniments room, okay? And in that muniments room, there are 20,000 documents, okay? They even went so far as to employ the ex-county archivist at the castle on a semi-permanent basis. So they had the ex-county archivist, a guy called David Smith, who used to work in the castle basement and dig out all these amazing archives for us all the time. But basically 7,000 of these documents are medieval, and a lot of those documents haven't been read since the day that they were written. So there are lots and lots of documents. So basically we wanted to try to marry up the archaeology with the landscape, with the castle's history, and understand the makings and the origins of Berkeley.
So can I just stop you a minute?
Yes, of course.
Stuart, is it possible to make your screen any bigger? You know, we talked about screen sharing and making it a bit bigger.
No, because if I try and do that, then what will happen is I won't be able to see you, so I'll be just talking to myself. Yeah. So this is the biggest that I can get. Hang on, let me just see if I can get it any bigger. But I don't think I can. No, I can't. I'm sorry. That's the biggest I can get it. Yeah. Unless if I click the screen share, then I'm gonna lose sight of you guys, and I'd rather keep sight of you guys.
Are you sure? Are you sure, Stuart, that you can't bear to lose us? It's just that people are putting in the chat that they'd love you to make it bigger.
Okay. Don't blame me for what's about to happen. Hang on. Better?
Now we can't see anything now. This happened when we did our practice, didn't it?
Yeah. Okay.
So I
Right.
don't know why that's happened. I'm sorry to interrupt. It was just that in the chat, people kept saying,
I'm going to have to
Stuart,
stop sharing now because there's nothing I can do because it's no.
No.
Hang on.
So if you go back to the way you were,
Right.
okay? Sorry, as you were, Stuart.
Okay. Can you see
Yeah.
that? Right.
Yeah.
Great. I'm sorry about that. The problem is when you make it when you switch it into full screen mode,
Yeah.
you tend to lose the control of you tend to lose the control of the PowerPoint. Yeah, and you can't.
Yeah.
That's about the biggest I can get it. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yes.
Oh no, that's no good either. That's worse. Oh no. Oops. 1 second. No, I'm gonna have to stop sharing a minute. Hang on 1 sec. Sorry. Right, start again. Okay, and my screen share. Okay.
Right.
You see that now? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back to where we were.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Okay, so basically, Berkeley is situated. It's in a low-lying. Basically, Berkeley sits on a wedge-shaped ridge that rises from relatively low-lying watery landscape. It's very near. It's very near the bird park, which I've forgotten the name of. Slimbridge. It's very near Slimbridge. So basically, it was in the prehistoric period. It would have been ideal for wildlife and wildfowl. And we know that there was hunting there because we had a few prehistoric artifacts from the ridge at Berkeley. But basically, one of the earls at Berkeley, one of the castle owners, actually diverted the northern course of one of the northern courses of the stream. So anywhere you come into Berkeley, you have to cross a bridge. Yeah, so Berkeley from the 13th century is completely surrounded by water. Okay, so essentially that map there essentially shows the town, and this kilometre and a half long ridge, and basically in the north. A stream comes down and it splits two ways and goes around the town. So whichever way you approach Berkeley, you have to cross a river or a stream. Okay, so we know that it's basically the town sits prominently on a ridge, and every other settlement hillock in that area had some sort of Roman town built within that area. So if there's a hill, then the Romans would build a settlement, and I'll show you a map in a minute that actually shows the Roman occupation of the area. In the Anglo-Saxon period, it was a strange little kingdom called the Kingdom of the Huiche. The Kingdom of the Huiche begins with an H there. You can just see what you can see it just in here. Yeah, the Kingdom of the Huiche. And essentially that means the Kingdom of the Witches. So I'm not quite sure what was going on at Berkeley around that period, but essentially it was this Huiche kingdom. And these guys basically were the lords of that territory. So the earliest recorded Huichian princes were Enfrith and Inhir, who were joint rulers over the Huiche around the mid-600s. And the next two brothers, Oshir and Osric, were also joint rulers of the kingdom. And it's possible that it's because there were two tribes, Anglo and Saxon. So so basically the territory was divided by two divisions and by two brothers. Okay. And these were Mercian kings, basically, and they held feasts. assembled in great halls, hunted, heard harpists recite Beowulf and other similar poems, wore magnificent jewelry and clothes, and maintained a glittering retinue. Importantly, the leaders of the Huiche were Christian by 660, and the wives of the two brothers, Ossier and Osric, were fervent minster builders. And the next map actually shows some of the minsters that they established. So you can see that there was a chain of minsters starting in the north towards Mercia and coming further south. Basically, they were building minsters as they went across the country. And basically, these two brothers or the two brothers' wives were building these Anglo-Saxon minsters. So we thought that Berkeley was probably one of these Anglo-Saxon minsters, and we needed to prove that that was the case. And we were looking for evidence of these Anglo-Saxon minsters. We've got proof, historical proof. A guy called Smith or Smythe said of the castle, in the southeast end of the town is seated the castle of Berkeley, a great part whereof was built out of the ruins of the nunnery which formerly stood in that place. So Smith suggests that the nunnery was founded in 883, and Walter Map argues that Earl Godwin basically brought about the untimely demise of the minster in 1043, basically around the beginning of the time of Edward the Confessor. Now, it was reputedly some trickery and some deviousness to destroy the minster. The legend is that a local comely youth got into the minster's hospital and impregnated the nuns bit by bit. And basically, the minster was shut down because of the unseemly conduct of the abbess and the nuns of Berkeley. But what we do know is that the first authenticated sources for an abbey at Berkeley are found in the Anglo-Saxon charters from 824 and 883. And we've got coin evidence in the paddock that we excavated of the Mercian king Coenwulf that suggests that the minster is actually a Mercian royal foundation of the 7th century. And I'll get to the evidence for actually the minster itself in a minute. We had some Anglo-Saxon stonework in the castle, which kind of points again to this high status Anglo-Saxon building. And there's some really nice bits of masonry from a high status Anglo-Saxon building. And in the church, in St. Mary's Church itself, you've got this strange Anglo-Saxon string course. So if you go and look at any of the minster churches from the Anglo-Saxon period in Gloucestershire, you've got this double string brickwork on the outside of these, like places like Deerhurst. They've got an Anglo-Saxon church that survives at Deerhurst, and all of the outside of the churches have got this double string course. And you can see there's one string course there, another one. Now this is on the inside of the present Church of St. Mary's, right? But I think this is part of the surviving external wall of the original Anglo-Saxon church, and basically a lot of the Anglo-Saxon stone experts agree that this is probably the exterior wall of the original Anglo-Saxon church at Berkeley. So we think we've got essentially what's called a double house minster. You've got monks and nuns living inside this double house minster. Okay, so somewhere there would be a nun's church, and this would be St. Mary's, would be the monks church. We've got coin evidence. So basically there's actual coins minted at Berkeley. There are coins. So somewhere there's almost certainly you only get coins minted in high status Anglo-Saxon birds and such like. So basically a defended settlement. So somebody at some point is minting coins at Berkeley, and we know they're minted at Berkeley because it actually says Berkeley on the coins themselves. We've also got some very high status treasure from the period. Okay, this is in the Berkeley Castle family private collection. So basically it's a very high status Anglo-Saxon ring, probably of the 9th to 10th century. Leslie Webster, who used to work at the British Museum, came and looked at the ring, and assured me that this is a very high status piece of jewelry from this area. And actually, if you look very closely at that ring, you can see these little dogs' heads or bats' heads on the terminals of the ring. So, you know, you've got these little heads just here, little eyes, little snout, little ears that's like dogs or bats. And if you go to the church at Deerhurst, the terminals of around the doorways, you've got these arches, and around the doorways you've got these arches, and the terminals, basically the terminal heads, end in these strange little dog head motifs as well. So essentially, you've got a high status Anglo-Saxon ring of the 9th to 10th century from Berkeley. It was found by one of the gardeners at Berkeley Castle in the 17th or 18th century. And basically, one of the gardeners uncovered it and then handed it to the family. And it's been in the Berkeley Bank vault ever since that time. We were lucky enough to be able to persuade them to actually get it out of the bank vault so we could have a look at it. And we took some photographs, and it's the first time it's been seen for ages. So we knew that at Berkeley, somewhere underneath the present town, there should be the remains of an Anglo-Saxon minster. So basically, we set out to try to find this Anglo-Saxon minster, and it took us 15 years essentially to prove that there is not only an Anglo-Saxon minster, but also a Roman settlement underneath the present town of Berkeley. So these are some of the areas we excavated. Our main excavation is in this area here, where it says garden. In the English Civil War, a lot of the buildings that used to sit on the right hand side of High Street were destroyed. So in the 17th century, some of the buildings that used to reside in this side of High Street were destroyed. So essentially, we had the perfect opportunity to excavate within that paddock and actually look for evidence of this minster. But before we started that, we actually excavated in. You see where it says gardens just underneath those two little stars there. We excavated there. This is a walled garden, an Edwardian / Victorian walled garden. And basically our first trench was in there. And why we excavated there is the fact that we noticed that on all of the early maps, the boundary on the right hand side of the church, so here's St Mary's Church, and this boundary going up the right hand side of the church and then continuing, if there was a boundary continuing through the gardens here, it would have been a perfect opportunity to look and see whether there's any evidence for big ditches which you get around the Anglo-Saxon minster. We thought that this shape, yeah, you can see you can see the line of the churchyard here, okay, another cemetery here, okay, and we thought that actually this shape going around Berkeley, to the backs of the gardens here, and I'll show you that on the map in a minute, was essentially the outline of the minster. So we were basically looking to see if this actually comprised the outline of this Anglo-Saxon minster. So here are all the trenches we dug, yeah, trench 1, trench 3, all the way up to, I think we got to trench 16 at one point, as trench 19 down there is the last trench we dug, I think. But essentially you can see in that plan, we were looking for, you can see the line of the churchyard there, all the way up there. And then through the garden there, this Edwardian / Victorian garden had cut through the line of this minster. So we thought this would be a good place to dig to see whether or not we could actually find any evidence for this minster. Again, that's the line on the map. The red line is where we thought this Anglo-Saxon minster was. So you can see we thought it was quite big, but actually it proved that it was actually a lot smaller than that. And I've got a map at the end that actually shows you where we think the outline of the minster is. We've also got evidence for a second church. Okay, so you can see on where I'm wiggling the St Mary's Church there. There's a freestanding church tower in St Mary's Churchyard. Now, the locals said that the reason why there's a freestanding church tower is if you connected the church tower to the existing St Mary's Church, it would compromise the castle's defences. And so they didn't build it next to the church, but they built it freestanding. Now, actually, if you look closely, that's an earlier, this is a picture in the castle itself of the earlier church tower. So basically that church tower was actually destroyed during the English Civil War, right? So basically it got so badly damaged in a cannon fire in the Civil War that they had to tear it down. But on that image, you can see that triangular roof scar just above the door there, showing that there was another building attached to that earlier church tower. And we thought that that could potentially be the nuns' church. And we excavated in the churchyard, and sure enough, we did find the footprint of this building. But we couldn't actually excavate it because there are graves buried within the footprint of that church. So essentially, because the churchyard's been used for hundreds of years, we couldn't excavate very, very close to that church tower because of all the graves. But we did manage to put in a little trench and actually find the remains of parts of that Anglo-Saxon church, which we think is the nuns' church. And actually, we've got the name of the church as All Saints Church. So basically, you can see there's the freestanding church tower. This is a 1712 illustration by a guy called Jan Kipp. Okay, so you can see the castle, you can see St Mary's Church, and you can see this freestanding church tower. And just beyond the freestanding church tower, those beautiful gardens there is Edward Jenner's gardens. So basically, this is the Edward Jenner Museum. This is where Edward Jenner, or Major Jenner, used to reside. And Edward Jenner, I'm sure you all know, is famous for very topical, the invention of inoculations. Yeah. So if it wasn't for Edward Jenner, the inoculation process may never have happened. So basically, Edward Jenner saved lots and lots of lives because he invented the cure for smallpox. But basically, Edward Jenner's inoculation, I used to have a little thing called the Temple of Vaccina, is situated just in that area there, at the end of the garden, and used to inoculate the local people for free, in order that they didn't die of smallpox. So Berkeley Castle itself is probably the longest continually occupied building in England, right? Essentially, it's been occupied by the same family, Roger de Berkeley, and actually Robert Fitzharding. Basically, it's been in residence, a wealthy Bristol merchant, Robert Fitzharding, and he's been in residence since the anarchy period. So if you think about our royal family and Windsor Castle, essentially, the Berkeley family have been in occupation and in the same castle for longer than you think about changes in the royal family, William of Orange and that sort of thing. And the Berkeley family have been in residence in that building since the 12th century. So it's probably the longest continually occupied building in the country, and it's been in the hands of Robert Fitzharding's forebears until the present day. This is just a shot of a shot of the castle from a distance, and actually this is the year where it flooded. The big floods we had in Gloucestershire back in the 90s, and essentially the field at the front of Berkeley completely flooded. And you could see this was the intention. Maurice de Berkeley basically built the watercourse so that if he wanted to flood the meadow at the front there, he could do so as a defensive measure for the castle itself. So what's the earliest archaeological features we've got at Berkeley? Well, I mentioned that on every hill around Berkeley, there is some form of Roman settlement. So you've got lots and lots of little Roman settlements, and we were looking to see whether or not there was any evidence for Roman occupation in and around Berkeley. And this is one of the trenches we excavated in the Edward Jenner Museum garden. And if you look very closely, the mud was a nightmare, by the way. When we used to dig in the town, we used to make the town red, because all the students walking backwards and forwards in town, they every time they walked up backwards and forwards in town, they would leave red footprints everywhere. But if you look very closely in the top corner there, you can see there's a skeleton. and that skeleton's been cut in half by the ditch. So this ditch coming through here is the earliest feature, and it's a Roman feature, probably 3rd to 4th century. The skeleton is probably either early Roman or even Iron Age. So you've got the feet of the skeleton there, and you've got the head and the torso of the skeleton here, and his legs have gone because the Romans have cut a ditch through the remains of that body. There's the skeleton. There's the skeleton. There's his feet. Yeah, there's the feet. There's the skeleton. Okay, and this is the Roman ditch cutting through, and you could see the line of the ditch. And when we did some geophysics, you could see that basically it turned the corner just at that point there where those two students are standing. So we had evidence for some Roman occupation. We had evidence for a Roman farmstead or a Roman building of some sort. This is rough kind of masonry from the inside of a wattle and daub type structure. It's probably a 3rd to 4th century Romano-British farmstead of some description. So the earliest evidence we've got for Berkeley is some sort of Roman farmstead or some sort of Roman building at Berkeley. So we then started to try and investigate the potential Roman features. We had some Roman features within our paddock. We knew that there were Romans around because we found an Anglo-Saxon building, but from that Anglo-Saxon building, within the fabric of that Anglo-Saxon building, there was reused Roman brick and tile. So we had Roman hypercourse tiles from a Roman heating system. You can see just here, if you can see that, there's those bits of tile there in that Anglo-Saxon hearth, a reused Roman brick and tile. There's a post hole. This is a Roman post hole, basically for some sort of fence post or gate post. And it's been built into an Anglo-Saxon building. I'll come back to this building later. Okay. We also had cart tracks. We had rough cart tracks running up across our trench. You can see just here that there are cart tracks basically running in a east-west direction up across our trench. And from those cart tracks, we had things like Roman spoons, okay, and a big chunk of Roman silver bowl and Roman Polden Hill brooch, 1st to 2nd century. So we had Roman activity. So this is one of Costas's maps. I know Costas is in the audience. One of Costas's maps showing and this has gone off to press. So this is the unfinished map. The book is about to be published, so by the time it gets into print, it will be a much better map. But basically, this is a tentative outline of where this Roman settlement might have been. This Roman fortlet might have been either a very small fortlet, that sort of size, or a larger fortlet. Basically, the footprint of Berkeley could be a Roman fort of some description. So we had a Roman fort. So then we wanted to know whether there's any Anglo-Saxon archaeology. So, you know, we were basically trying to figure out whether Berkeley started its life as some sort of Anglo-Saxon minster in the 6th to 7th century. So we excavated, as I said, in this walled garden, and what we discovered is that this walled garden had been landscaped. So basically in the Edwardian Victorian period, they had landscaped the garden, and they've taken all the soil from one end of the garden and dumped it at the other end to make the landscape level. And we had about 70 centimeters or so of Victorian and Edwardian material, and then we went straight down onto Anglo-Saxon. So there was nothing in between. There was no medieval finds as such. Basically, that the whole landscape had been scalped, and we went straight down onto this big millstone, and you can just see this slot cut through there. This is an Anglo-Saxon millstone, and the next year we came back, and we basically, from that millstone, discovered this big truncated. So basically the top of this ditch had been scalped away. So it would have been quite a substantial ditch, probably 2 or 3 meters wide at the top. But this is the very bottom section of this Anglo-Saxon ditch. So this is one side. This is the northeast corner of our Anglo-Saxon minster. And there's the ditch running up there, running through. There's the Anglo-Saxon ditch. And we had some coin evidence. This is the coin of King Edgar the Peaceable, the great-great-grandson of Alfred the Great. So we had Anglo-Saxon coin evidence, which ties in nicely with the date of our Anglo-Saxon minster. So having found the minster ditch on one side, so basically on the eastern side, we then needed to move to the western side of the hill and actually see if we could find the western edge of this Anglo-Saxon ditch. So basically we were looking for the outline of this Anglo-Saxon minster, and sure enough, several years later, it's 10 years later, we actually found this very large Anglo-Saxon ditch. So we had our minster ditch. So we know now that there is this great ditch, Anglo-Saxon ditch. So you can see that you can see in the previous slide that you know that's basically the bottom of this Anglo-Saxon ditch, and it would have originally looked like that, but because it's been truncated, it's been cut away, you've only got the very bottom section of this Anglo-Saxon ditch. There are actually two ditches, a double minster, and actually there were 3 ditches in total, so it's been recut several times as well over a long period of time. So there's the 2 ditches running through the trench, running through the trench. And you can see several buildings in this trench as well. So we had basically the east side of the minster and the west side of the minster. So we then went to the top of the minster. We dug another trench to try to find the northern end. And we did, in fact, the most popular trench I've ever dug, because it was actually in the Crown Beer Garden. So basically we dug in the Berkeley Arms Beer Garden. So all the students, of course, wanted to excavate in the beer garden because it was one of the most popular trenches. They can't drink on site because it's an archaeological excavation. You're not supposed to drink, but they all wanted to go and dig in the beer garden because it was a hot summer's day and they thought it would be great fun to dig in the beer garden, which they actually did. So we found just the very, very edge of this Anglo-Saxon ditch in the beer garden. So then we needed to look inside the minster itself. I've already pointed out some of the Roman features to you. Basically, wherever you get Roman structures, you get building materials. So the Anglo-Saxons, when they arrived in the 6th to 7th century, they basically dismantled the old Roman structures and used them in the construction of the Anglo-Saxon minster. And we had within the boundary of the Anglo-Saxon minster itself, some buildings. And so basically what you've got, in fact, I'll go to the next slide, is you've got a wall, and a wall. Very, very, very truncated, very dug away, but you can just see the slot there, basically, which is essentially this Roman gate post. So they're using all sorts of Roman material, and then in the middle we still had the remains of a hearth. So you can see the Roman tile there. So basically they've used this Roman hypocaust tile to form the edge of this fire pit within the structure itself. So you need to then ask yourself, if you've got Anglo-Saxon buildings, have you got any proof that it is actually from a minster and not anything else? So we were then looking for evidence, and we were really, really lucky. In this very building, we found evidence for reading and writing. Just amazing that we found it. But basically, we had what's called an astle. So this strange little object here, this thing's got a Celtic cross within it. Is something called an astle. So basically, at the bottom of this strange little metal artifact here would be a long bone pin, right? You would use your long bone pin basically to read aloud from your illuminated manuscript or your Bible page. Okay, when you get to the end of the page, you would then basically turn your page over with the astle, because you don't want to get your grubby medieval fingers all over your illuminated manuscript. So essentially this astle was used, and it's basically, I'm sure you've all probably heard of the Alfred jewel. This is almost like the pound stretcher version of the Alfred jewel. So this is a cheap knockoff version of the Alfred jewel. You can see it's gilded, so it's high status. And with that, we found evidence of a whetstone. Now, these little whetstones, which you can see in the picture to the right-hand side there, these little whetstones are frequently hung around the necks of monks. And places like Lindisfarne, a lot of the monks are buried with these whetstones hung around the necks. And the reason for it is that when they are writing their illuminated manuscript, they basically have a little knife, and they use the whetstone to sharpen their knife, and the knife is used to cut the quill to write their illuminated manuscripts. So we had within that structure evidence for reading and writing. Now, this is important because basically the only people that were literate in that period were, if a king wanted a document drawn up, he went to a minster or a monastery. All right, so we have evidence for reading and writing from the 6th to 7th century, or even maybe the 8th to 9th century. We also know that we've got high status coinage. So we've got these shatters. Got to be careful how you say that, but these Anglo-Saxon shatters. These are again high status coins. We've got some coins of Ethelred. We've got continental shatters. We've got a primary skeet of 600 to 700s. This is the earliest Anglo-Saxon find we've got from Berkeley. We've got good coin evidence from in and around that building of these Anglo-Saxon, basically proving that this is an Anglo-Saxon structure. This is the continental skeet. And we have lots and lots of other Anglo-Saxon finds, 8th to 10th century, essentially. Copper alloy rings, tweezers, bone dice, little strap ends from Anglo-Saxon belt, little belt fittings, all of these lovely Anglo-Saxon finds. And we also have a terminal from a knife handle, again, according to Leslie Webster, British Museum. This is, it doesn't look like much. The students call it the Berkeley gnome because it looks like a little gnome, two little eyes and a little Frisian cap. So this is the little hat on the head of this little gnome. But it's the terminal of a knife handle. So if you turn it sideways, think about the terminal of the knife handle. So basically, this is the terminal of a knife handle. Basically, yeah, this lovely little, and it's probably a woman's face actually, but essentially she's wearing some sort of Frisian cap. So we've got evidence for our Anglo-Saxon minster. So we were then interested to see how Berkeley developed from this Anglo-Saxon minster with the coming of the Normans from 1066 onwards, and with the construction of the castle. So we then started to look at evidence for the later structures. So we were interested in things like the houses along High Street, and to try to work out the dates of the houses. And one of the buildings that we've had, one of the buildings that we left intact actually, which might date from around this period when High Street was constructed in Bristol. They actually excavated Robert Fitzharding's house, so we know that Robert Fitzharding was building this sort of structure. This is Robert Fitzharding's house. This is Robert Fitzharding's house in Bristol. The house this house at Berkeley very much looks similar to Robert Fitzharding's house in Bristol. So we were hoping that we could get evidence from this building to show that this house was of Norman construction. The wall at the back is a really solid build, but it's been used again and again and again in various constructions, and it's had several buildings constructed over it, as you'll see in a few slides later. So there's been lots and lots of construction of various different buildings again and again over the top of this Anglo-Saxon of these Anglo-Saxon and Norman buildings. So there's the back wall I'm talking about, yeah. And then you can see there's a kink in the wall here. So there are various buildings fronting onto High Street. There's a cross wall in there. And then you've got the building next door as well. So you can actually see the house next door as well. So all along this side of High Street, just like the other side of High Street, you've got two rows of houses, and this is basically the Norman Nouveau Burgo, the Norman New Town. So the Normans came along, they constructed the High Street, they constructed the castle, and the castle is almost certainly built on the only piece of land that was available for the Normans to construct the castle, because normally you would build your castle in a prominent location on the top of the hill. But at Berkeley, because the Minster is a high status Christian centre, they had to build on the only piece of land available to them. And so they basically sited their castle on what is almost certainly the old Minster churchyard. And there's evidence from the records that essentially it depends on how you translate the wording, but it says either my castle is built in a cemetery or my castle is surrounded by a cemetery. Depends on how you translate the Latin. But essentially, we think that Berkeley Castle is actually on the old Anglo-Saxon Minster Cemetery. I'm not going to say too much about the castle. This is the 8th Earl's plan. So the 8th Earl was an amateur archaeologist, and he did some excavation and uncovered various parts of the gatehouse. This is that picture from the castle that shows that earlier church tower. And hopefully you can see that raggle. That's a great word, that. Mick Aston taught me that word, this raggle. This scar, this roof scar, that shows that there was an earlier building attached to this, an earlier building attached to this church tower. So this is what we think is the nuns' church. Now, if you look at the tower, you can see these two prominent towers, but part of the wall, and it appears that there's part of that building missing. And one of the theories we had is that actually there was some big Norman donjon as well. So there was a big Norman tower at Berkeley Castle, which was damaged during the English Civil War. And you've only got kind of the remains of this castle, the remains of this Norman donjon, this Norman Great Tower left. So we were determined as well to test the validity of that statement and to try to find the remains of this Norman donjon as well. So there's the castle. You can see this ditch between the castle and the church. It's not a very big space between the castle and the church. There's the freestanding church tower. The legend is that when the church was basically, the church was attacked in the 17th century, because it was the only way that you could hold the castle was to defend the church. And if you go to Berkeley today and look at the west end door of the church itself, you can see that there are holes where they've cut through the church door to put muskets through to defend the church. So in the 17th century, this church was attacked. Lots of people were killed in defense of the castle. And they needed to defend the church in order to defend the castle, right? And basically, the legend is that from the local people, that the parliamentarians then hauled the cannon up onto the church roof and let the castle have it with their cannons from the church roof. And if you look at the gap in the castle wall, you can actually see. There's a huge gap in the castle wall there, where this basically, the church is just over to the left of the picture, and basically this is exactly where the castle was slighted. So basically this is the English Civil War damage upon the castle, because they managed to capture the church, and therefore capturing the church, they managed to take the castle, and basically the guys in the castle surrendered. So we would try to find evidence, and you can see this looks very much like the Tower of London, the back wall. So you've got one wall surviving of this Norman Great Tower, or Norman donjon, and this is a much later structure tacked on the front of it. So we were trying to find evidence for this great tower. So this is where we thought this great tower was. This blue box basically represents where we thought the great tower was going to be, and we excavated. You can see in the remains of the castle that there are bits in the castle that don't make much sense. So you can see there are scars in the castle that don't make sense unless it is part of this Norman Great Tower. So we excavated in the only bit of land we could, and we did indeed find a robbed out wall. Okay, this is the only bit that we could excavate. This is basically the footprint of where this tower would have been. And indeed, we did find this proposed Norman donjon. So we basically figured out that there was indeed a proposed donjon. So basically, it used to be. In fact, I'll go to the next slide. This is where the footprint would have been. It would have been very much like Richmond Castle. So it would have been a massive Norman donjon like this. Okay, but because of various civil wars, the English Civil War, the Anarchy period, the castle has been badly damaged and parts of it have been destroyed. And then we can move into the Tudor period. So these are the buildings. This building, this 14th to 15th century longhouse, actually is the top end of the trench. So basically, this building overlays all of the archaeology I've just shown you. So this is the stuff we came down on at the top end, the higher levels of excavations. So we had houses on top of houses, essentially. So this is a 14th to 15th century longhouse, and you can still see the hearth. In fact, there were 3 hearths within that structure, still intact and in situ. Running up through the trench, there's a picture of the channel and the river running up to Berkeley. So you can see that St Mary's Church is portrayed in this early tapestry. And running up through the paddock itself, there was something called St Michael's Lane. St Michael's Lane. I've blown it up a little bit here, so you can see the road to the castle. Yeah. And then just above it, there's something called St Michael's Lane running up to a cross, like a freestanding cross. The cross isn't there anymore. St Michael's Lane isn't there anymore, but we could see it in the trench. We could actually see the building and St Michael's Lane running up through our trench. So this is Tudor archaeology, and this Tudor building adjacent to St Michael's Lane. There's St Michael's Lane running up through the trench. There's the building alongside it. There is the hearth that I was talking about, this intact medieval hearth. And again, we had lovely Tudor coins, Tudor money embedded within St Michael's Lane. And again, then at the very bottom of the trench in the corner, we had the Crown Inn. We actually found the stable block for a pub that used to sit in the corner of the trench, and we know the name of the pub. It's in the documentation. We know who owned the pub, and we know where the stable block was. Yeah, so we had some really good finds from this excavation, and this is a stable block for the Crown Inn. And we know that there was a cavalry charge on the ditch that surrounded the church, and we found evidence for this ditch. I told you about the freestanding church. You see all the pot marks in the stone. This is the west door of the church. You can see all the musket shots on the west door of the church. So this is where the parliamentarians are actually attacking the church and leaving pot marks and evidence for gunpowder and pistol shot and musket ball shot on the outside of the church. And basically, we found an English Civil War fortification ditch. So this is a classic 17th century ditch that basically was used to surround the church. And basically, the guys that were manning this ditch, the royalists that were manning this ditch, fell to the cavalry charge, and we had pistol shot and musket shot. And essentially, the people were killed. The people were killed in the attack on the ditch. Then they were killed in the attack on the church. And then the parliamentarians basically hauled the cannon up onto the church roof and let the castle have it. And the castle then subsequently surrendered. So we could see this ditch surrounding the church, and you can just see that I've highlighted it here for you. That's our ditch, and this is the conjecture of where this English Civil War ditch ran. Between the church and the castle itself, the ditch continued. Now, we thought when we were first excavating between the church and the castle, we were looking in a medieval. The best place to excavate medieval deposits is from a ditch between a church and a castle, or actually the moat around the castle. We thought we were excavating in the moat around the castle, but actually it turned out to be a 17th century fortification ditch, and that basically we found that it was classic Vauban illustration. This is an illustration from one of those medieval military manuals of the time, showing how you cut your fortifications, and that what we had 17th century archaeology between the church and the castle was this English Civil War ditch. And when the parliamentary attack came on the castle, they basically they were in the middle of some sort of meal, and we know this because we had flat bottom bottles of wine. We had plates and cutlery all abandoned in the bottom of this ditch, you know. So in the 17th century, when the attack came, the guys would probably stop for lunch and actually trampled over all this stuff. And we found all the 17th century material in the bottom of this ditch, still in situ. And then on top of the ditch, the last layer of archaeology that we had on top of the ditch was, unfortunately, human remains. So over the top of all of this site, so this is the very top layer, just beneath the turf, you can see here we've got skeletons, and all the legs of the skeletons are underneath the wall. So at some point the Berkeleys built the church wall around the churchyard, and unfortunately they left the skeletons that basically were buried against at the very limit of the cemetery. Actually, the legs of the skeletons ended up underneath the wall, and all the skulls and the bodies ended up outside the wall. So the legs are still buried beneath the wall, and that we are doing some at the moment some forensic analysis on the skeletons. The skeletons have turned out to be, the teeth of these skeletons are in a terrible state of disrepair. We think it's probably from eating either a very high status diet, so lots of sugar to rot the teeth, or a very poor diet where there are lots of tooth decay as a result of poor diet. So this is still an ongoing study. We're basically still trying to get to the bottom of what happened with these skeletons, but these are 17th to 18th century skeletons, and the work on the skeletons is still very much ongoing, and we will be able to tell you a bit more about the skeletons in future years. But you can see there's the skull, there's the body, and the legs unfortunately are trapped underneath the wall itself. And as I said, also I say rich diet, but actually there's good evidence as well from the bones of scurvy in these children. So this is why we thought that they might be a poor diet rather than a rich diet, a wealthy diet. And then the last thing I was going to talk to you about is essentially one of the things that we did was some community archaeology. So in order to involve the community at Berkeley, we had things like the community town museum. So basically we went around all of the shops, actually basically got them to display all of some of the finds from our excavations in all of the shop windows. So we very much involved the town within our excavations. And the final slide really is to tell you that the book, the hardback version of the book, is going to be published very soon. You can see 15th of May. It's going to come out in print. So if you want to know more about the excavations in the Minster and the Roman settlement at Berkeley, then the book is for sale on Amazon as we speak. And then finally, I was going to quickly end with a quick plug for our latest project. So we've finished Berkeley now, and we are just basically publishing the results of the excavations at Berkeley. but we are now moving to a place called Lower Hazel. So we're moving our centre of operations to Lower Hazel with another community archaeology group who are shown, some of whom are shown in that picture in the bottom corner. And essentially, we have got a really amazing site. This is an anarchy period site. So we've got 12th and 13th century pottery. So this is the era of Stephen and Matilda and the first English Civil War, the anarchy period. Robert of Gloucester in Bristol Castle, King Stephen in London, Queen Matilda, or Empress Matilda rather, and basically Robert and Empress Matilda trying to take the crown from King Stephen, based in London. And essentially this building in Lower Hazel is exactly of the period. We know it's defended. We know, well, not defended, but we know it's a building from the anarchy period that's been attacked, and it's probably King Stephen's men attacking one of Robert of Gloucester's residence households in the period around in the period when King Stephen was trying to get Robert of Gloucester to come out of the castle to fight him man to man, and Robert of Gloucester wouldn't leave the castle. So Stephen went round the neighbourhood, basically attacking all of the settlements around Bristol Castle. And this is probably one of those settlements. So essentially, the community group have been excavating there for 5 years. We've been asked by the local archaeologists to come in, get involved with the community, and actually help them to finish off the excavation. So we've set up a 5-year project at Lower Hazel to do some community archaeology with the Lower Hazel people, and essentially we will be excavating at some point. We were supposed to start last summer. It's now moved to this summer. We're still hoping we'll be able to excavate, but because of COVID, we don't know what's going on. We just don't know. We're waiting for university permission to go and excavate. So at some point, we will be excavating at Lower Hazel. It's a community archaeology project. So if any of you would like the opportunity to come and do some excavation with us, you may have the opportunity to do so, is where I was going to end. There you go. I'll shut up for a minute. And turn it over to Linda to say a few words or whatever. Thank you for listening. And I'll take a drink. Linda, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. That was lovely. Now, do you want to stop screen sharing so that we can see?
Oh, yeah, of course. 1 second.
Stop screen sharing, and then hopefully we can see each other.
Stop share. There we go.
Yeah, excellent. So now we can do gallery view. If everyone puts on gallery view, we should all be able to see each other. Now we can't, because we're on 2 screens, we can't all see each other, but thank you so much, Stuart, for that.
There you go. I can see you. There you go.
It's really, really interesting, and really, like, for me, beyond a lot of things that I'm sort of aware of. I think the skeletons for me were the most interesting, but let's see what other people would like to ask you, Stuart.
Any questions?
Now we've got chat, as people are saying lovely things. Right, congratulations, super talk. Any questions at the moment? Has anyone got their hand up? Or can anyone unmute themselves and actually call out?
But all very quiet.
Stuart was very modest there in that he didn't mention winning archaeology prize.
Oh, I did. Yeah, that's right.
Year, or being on BBC Two's Digging for Britain with
Alice Roberts.
Alice Roberts interviewing you.
Yeah. Yeah, I did forget that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we for our community archaeology project in 2017, we won Archaeology Project of the Year with Current Archaeology. So it was a project that was recognised nationally across the country for our work at Berkeley. Yes, so yes, thank you, Martin, for pointing that out. Yeah. And as I say, if anybody's been inspired by the work that we've done, then you are more than welcome. Everybody at Lower Hazel is a volunteer, so I'm sure that they will welcome any extra help that any of you would like to offer in terms of this community project that we're going to get involved in.
So is Lower Hazel near Berkeley?
Yes, it's only a few miles away. Yeah, absolutely.
But would people go through you? I mean, is that the best way of doing it?
I suggest actually the best thing to do is to email me to start with, and we can give you the contact details for the community group themselves. Yeah. And then you can make arrangements for the community group rather than through us. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. The county archaeologist, whose name isn't the county archaeologist anymore, Paul Driscoll, is the archaeologist for that area. And he's the person that's asked us to step in and help them to figure out exactly what they've got there. Yeah. So, you know, we're stepping in to kind of help them to, you know, figure out the site and understand exactly what's going on. So we're going to be going to do some recording, etc., very soon. But we're hoping that, you know, we're going to have a really good excavation there with as many volunteers as we can get on that site.
Yeah, but of course nothing's happened for the last year then, really.
No, that's the problem. That's the problem.
Archaeology
We were
wise.
going to excavate and then we couldn't because of COVID, you know, so it all went a bit wrong, you know.
Yeah.
Any questions about the Minster? Do you all understand what a Minster is? Do you understand why what the Minster is? That is basically the fundamental it's the birth of our parochial system. So essentially, priests would go out into the community, okay, and they would basically take pastoral care out to the community, and they would go out into the community and actually spread the word of God to these pagan or heathen Anglo-Saxons, and actually bring them pastoral care and actually bring them the word of God. So essentially, this is and then when they were so far away from the Minster they couldn't come back again, they would basically maybe stop and build a parish church, and this is what led to the development of our parochial or parish church system. So it all springs from this Anglo-Saxon Minsters, and Berkeley is one of those Anglo-Saxon Minsters.
Right. Okay.
Can I have a word?
How dense? We've got a question here, Stuart. How densely packed were minsters? How far away was each one from the other generally?
Minsters, basically, if you imagine that each one was about a day's horse ride away from another one, you know. Right. So, but basically, you start with a Minster, and then people would spread out for the Minsters, and this is what led to the birth of our parochial system. Yeah, so you know, if you're more than a day's horse ride away, this is when you start to build your parish churches, and this is how the parish church system developed essentially. So it all starts in the 7th and 8th century.
And did you find mints associated with minsters?
No, the mints come from the mints come from Anglo-Saxon burrs. So essentially, not you don't normally. It's a later development. So when they start minting coins, it's 10th to 11th century, yeah, or late 10th century. So when you're minting coins, you're going into you have to get a king to approve your mint, yeah. So it's 10th and 11th century essentially.
Linda, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right, I've got a couple of questions, if I may. Where do all the bulk of the artifacts that you found, Stuart, where are they now?
Okay, so at the moment they are still in our department, okay, but this is something that my colleague Costas is working on at the moment. So essentially, eventually, because the castle is a recognized museum, we should be able to deposit the finds with the castle themselves. And we've got permission from the British Museum to deposit all of the finds with the castle. So essentially, at some point, a lot of the finds that we've uncovered from, and there's a lot of them, there's 10 years worth of excavation does tend to to basically end up with lots and lots of fines. So at some point, the fines from the excavation will be put on display in the castle, and they will house this collection of fines from the excavations themselves. Yeah. So in theory, it should all go to the castle itself.
Right.
And they're basically, there's a gallery. There's a gallery that's not much used. There's a few paintings in this gallery. So I think that they will convert the gallery. It's a painting gallery, but they will convert the gallery into a museum of sorts to put these finds on display, hopefully.
Right. Somebody else wants a question. Can you just call out, rather, because somebody raised their hand, but could you just ask the question?
Can I your question? At Farringdon, they found a couple of cannonballs from the Civil War in the roof of the church, and there's actually a cannonball embedded in an end wall of the church. Did you find any cannonballs from the Civil War?
We didn't find cannonballs, but we did find a lot of pistol shot and musket balls. Yeah, and the only people that have pistols are cavalry officers. So we had evidence for a cavalry charge on that ditch that I showed you in some of the last photographs. Yeah, so you know, we had that. We know that we've got the accounts of what happened at the castle, and the people that were holding the castle. But basically, we've got evidence of pistol shot and musket balls, and we've actually got the physical evidence as well of the musket loops that are cut through the west door of the church, and you can see all that scarring on the walls on the outside of those doors as well. So we've got a very good idea about what happened at the church and basically why they cut that ditch between the church and the castle in order to try and defend the church, in order to defend the castle, but it didn't work. Yeah. Right.
Thanks.
And I did in actually, I can still see the slide. You can't see it, but I can see it. The Lower Hazel project that we're about to go to, there are two big stone balls that were thrown through the roof of the structure, and these are anarchy period projectiles that are launched through the roof of this building, and they were still in situ within the building itself. So during the 12th century, the building at Lower Hazel was attacked and burnt down. And it's going to be really fascinating to try to understand what happened at Lower Hazel, and how it was attacked and who attacked it and why it was attacked. Yeah. So this is our next kind of mission. This is our next big thing, is to try to understand the anarchy period, and what happened with this building at Lower Hazel. Very military.
Can I ask a random question? You know, one of the kings you referred to as the Peaceable, I can't remember which one it was now, but Edgar the Peaceable. Were these labels ones that the kings gave themselves, or were they retrospective?
These are later historians giving them labels based on the quality of their reign. Yeah. So these are antiquarian historians that say, oh, he was a very peaceable chap, and then they give him a name, and he becomes Edward the Peaceable. So it's kind of it's an antiquarian thing to give these people these titles, you know. So it comes from antiquarian historians, basically.
All right. It's quirky though, isn't it? It gives them a sort of extra identity.
It does.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any more? Please do speak out now. I think people aren't all speaking at the same time, so please, any more questions? I think that might be it then.
Perfect.
I think we've come to the end of the questions. So thank you very, very much. I'm hoping that we can, visit Berkeley Castle one day, or that some people might want to join your next dig at Lower Hazel. So
absolutely. And if you want to, I'm happy to come with you to Berkeley Castle to show you the excavation site, and actually talk you around Berkeley itself, if you want me to come. Yeah,
that would be fantastic.
Let me know. If you let me know when you're going to visit, I will try and come and show you around.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. More than welcome.
Okay, thank you. That would be super. Lovely. Thank you. Bye-bye then, everybody.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Yeah,
Thanks ever so much. I'm glad you invited me. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thanks very